I remember being in middle school, listening to the radio with my dual cassette deck and just recording songs and making mixtapes. I guess you'd call them more like playlists today because I wasn't really mixing or anything back then. That was when I first fell in love with the radio. I was listening to Rap Attacks on KCMU, even listening to Cube, listening to different stations, trying to record the newest songs, you know, before they got to record stores. I've had a lifelong love with music. Back in those days, I remember I used to save up lunch money. Lunch money was like $1.25. The end of the week, I'd have enough money to buy a new tape. And I used to skip class every Tuesday because Tuesday was New Music Day, and go down to the, to the music menu or to, what are the other record stores? To Tower, the Music Land before it was Sam Goody, to buy a new tape every week, And it's kind of how my music collection started. I was young, I wasn't rapping yet, but I just used to love putting songs together, I wanted to DJ before I really got into making my own music. My family had moved to Las Vegas from Seattle when I was in the 10th grade. And when I was in Vegas, a lot of my mentors were DJs. I was around a lot more DJs than I was MCs during those years. Folks like Cool DJ EQ, Elof, who owned a record store called The Joint, that was my safe haven, DJ 5, DJ Doo-Wop, man, so many legendary cats in Vegas who, they were my homies, you know what I mean? And I wanted to DJ before anything else. Because of, financial pressures, I was not able to keep turntables once I purchased them. We had to sell them back or return them to the record store to pay rent. That's the story that happened with my first set of turns. But I still collected vinyl, and I still loved just putting songs together and collecting hard to find songs, songs that you couldn't just get on a CD, Fast forward a couple years, I go back to Seattle, 1999. I meet folks like Chasm. I meet the whole Seattle hip hop scene pretty much within the course of, a few weeks. I loved freestyling. I loved going down to downtown and just meeting up with a bunch of MCs and freestyling all day, every day. And that's kind of what led to my first group, 500 Years. My first band, I was 18. It was 1999. And, made a lot of music. Did my first solo record in 2001. Around the same time, my crew with Kings, Abyssinian Creole, was formed. And we put out our album in 2005, again with Chasm and WD-40, who did all the cuts on that first Abyssinian Creole album. He's been my DJ ever since for live shows. That year, 2005, well, actually 2004, I would say, was my first experience with producing a radio show. It was for an online platform called OCO.com. It was myself, Kings of Abyssinian Creole, and our guy Jelani. We had a show called Tasty Sessions. It was just online, and we just played vinyl. And it was a place to, just a place to play all these records I collected since those days when I was in high school in Las Vegas, Chasm and WD-40 set the wheels in motion to do a radio show, a hip hop radio show on KBCS in 2005. They signed up for the basic broadcasting classes. They did all the work to get that show going. I was at the Chop Suey one night, and my friend Barbie Danielle DiCarlo, who worked at KBCS, approached me at the back of the show and said, "Would you ever like to do radio?" And I said, "Man, it's been a lifelong dream. I would love to do radio." She hooked me up with those basic broadcasting classes that Chasm and WD-40 were already doing. And she got me in on a scholarship. And You know, I did the classes and completed it just in time to start Zulu Radio, to launch the show basically with Kaz and WD-40. I remember Samia Pani, may she rest in peace. She let me shadow her on the Brazilian music show that she used to do on KBCS. So that was my first time in the booth, was with Samia. And yeah, man, doing Zulu Radio was a joy. We made our own radio edits. We were on late at night. The three of us would go initially all together, you know, in one car. Classic stops at the, you know, the gas station to get coffee and fuel for the late night hours. And it was a joy to do it every week with my guys. We started taking shifts after a while. You know, Kaz would do it one week, WD would do it one week, I would do it by myself one week. So many memories. Probably like the memory that stands out the most of doing Zulu Radio is, I don't think Chasm or WD-40 were there this week, but we did Zulu Radio one week during a blackout while all of KBCS was running off of a generator. And I had guests that week. I had brought Yidam Sek, Rogue Pinai, and Julie C. So it was the four of us at the station, and the generator went out in the middle of the show. So it was dead air, and I was having a hard time with the generator. So Yidam was out there with me. It was rainy, it was windy, and I remember Yidam started the generator, and the radio station would go on and go off, and Julie C. and Rogue Pinai stayed in the booth and basically had a conversation while me and Yidam were outside trying to basically like get the radio station to run. I remember after that night, I was like, everybody here just deserves a job in radio, just based off this one night. So Yidam, Julie, Rogue Pinai, if y'all see this, man, what's up? Y'all deserve it. Y'all should get a radio show, for real, you know? Yeah, I also want to shout out DJ B-Girl, because B-Girl, after we started Zulu Radio on KBCS, B-Girl started a show of her own. It was called Fresh Coast Radio. And yeah, after doing Zulu Radio for about 3 years, I don't remember exactly when B-Girl started, but I know it overlapped. Fresh Coast Radio and Zulu Radio were both on KBCS at the same time. And I would fill in for B-Girl on her show a lot. And it was cool getting to do radio like twice a week sometimes. I just loved it, man. I still love it, you know. I think Davey D's show started syndicating on KBCS around that time too. So it was awesome to hear Davey's voice before or after Zulu Radio. Just with all the, you know, the latest happenings, what was going on in the Bay Area, the awesome music that he spins, and, you know, the current affairs, the politics in his show are amazing. Davey D's a legend and one of my heroes in radio. And it was awesome to have our show go back to back with his. The only reason I left Zulu Radio, I didn't really leave. I just left Seattle. I moved to Canada in 2008, I want to say. And, you know, obviously had to stop doing the radio show in Seattle when you live in another city, in another country. But I remember still coming back sometimes, and still doing Zulu Radio probably like into 2009, still filling in for B-Girl every now and then on Fresh Coast Radio. And yeah, my music stuff just really took over, and it wasn't sustainable anymore to do this radio show once a week for free. None of us ever got paid. Everyone at KBCS are volunteers, pretty much, all the DJs at least. And I had other things I needed to do, you know, doing the late night hours once a week for no pay wasn't sustainable. So even after I moved back to Seattle, you know, it seemed like Zulu Radio was in good hands. So it just kept going, and I did other things, you know. I always missed doing radio though. I missed making playlists every week and sharing them. And you know, I've always had a really good relationship with KEXP as a musician. Aside from KBCS, KEXP was the first station to really support what we were doing with Abyssinian Creole back in 2005. again, it's the same year Zulu Radio started. Abyssinian Creole put out our first album. These things happened at the same time. I think I was still doing Zulu Radio when Lovework dropped too, which is crazy because we were touring constantly. So I must have not been doing the show that much that year, but I know I did. I know I did part of 2007. I had to. Anyways, the relationship with KEXP was awesome as a musician. They had our stuff in regular rotation, which helped so much with like getting performances and gigs. KEXP booked us themselves for shows, and we just always had a really great relationship with that station. With everyone at the station. Initially with Street Sounds, you know, with B Mello and then Larry Mizell Jr., but it grew beyond just that one specialty hip hop show, and you know, the variety DJs were supporting us just as much, you know. So yeah, it's always been a great relationship with KEXP. In 2007, I want to say, it was the 10-year anniversary of Lovework, which is this album that I released on Massline, which was this label that I did with Blue Scholars and Common Market, you know. And it was the first album of mine that really, like, you know, got an international reception. You know, that album grew legs and walked all over this planet. It gave me a career that I'm still standing on today. The one thing that I love about the Lovework album, and you know, like, I'm proud of that album and what it did in so many ways, but one of the things that I'm the most proud of is there's actually a UW honors class right now called Lovework, an unfinished syllabus, and the same things that the album is based on is what the class is based on, and I've gotten to be a guest speaker in that class every year. Shout outs to Jeanette Bushnell for that class. Yeah, man, that's just to say that album's a big deal. So, and I know that it meant a lot to a lot of people. So in 2007, I wanted to do an anniversary event for the 10-year anniversary of Lovework, and I thought of the KEXP Gathering Space as a place to book it. That got me back in touch after, you know, a few years of not really talking to a lot of the folks at KEXP, other than Don Yates, you know, the music director, and, you know, the Street Sounds host, of course. You know, I hadn't talked to John Richards or Kevin Cole in a while, but I reached out over that event. It ended up not working, just on their calendar or whatever. It didn't happen, but they invited me to perform at, what was it? It was Trump's inauguration, actually. And KEXP did an event. It was called the Bed In for Peace. That's right. And it was kind of like it was a protest event, basically, without calling it a protest, of Trump's inauguration. And, you know, it was a real somber day, but we filled the gathering space. I remember Grace Love performed. My friend Garfield Hilson performed. There were a lot of performances. And it was kind of an ill moment because KEXP, you know, this awesome radio station that's championed indie music for years and years, I never really saw them take such a political, you know, stance. And they stood up against racism, and they stood up against fascism and rape culture, which is what it means to stand up against Trump, you know. Obviously, you know, we remember after Trump became president, you know, one of the first things he did was the Muslim ban. And Derek Mazzoni, who is the WOPOP host, said just immediately, we're going to highlight musicians from these countries that Trump is targeting. And I thought it was an awesome idea. I think we were already connected on Facebook. So I reached out to Derek and I said, yo, can I send you some music from some of these countries? He invited me to come down to the station that day, and I did music of the band with Derek. And it was the first time I was back in a booth playing songs again for people. And in that moment, I just realized how much I missed it, you know. And that was kind of the first time I was like, man, maybe I should talk to KEXP about, you know, getting a job. The next thing that happened that year was Jonathan Moore passing away, you know, Big Brother John, who opened the door for so many of us in Seattle hip hop. He was a mentor to me through Sure Shot Sundays, which is a all ages weekly that I used to go to in a time when Seattle hip hop really didn't have any all ages venues. John and Erica White, who now owns Fats, had this weekly called Short Shot Sundays. It was the only all ages hip hop thing you could do in town. And they both mentored me. And I remember when John passed, I wished that someone did a tribute to John that was similar to what we did on Zulu Radio and on Tasty Sessions when Jay Dilla passed, which is, you know, we had 2 days where we played nothing but music that Jay Dilla produced. And you could have easily done the same thing with John if you played his music, music of the artists that he's mentored, that he's managed, that he's helped out, that he was connected to. It would have been an incredible, like, musical dedication. And I wasn't on the air to do it, you know? And it's not to knock anyone and any of the beautiful tributes that did happen to John, because they were amazing. But the thing I would have done didn't happen, you know? And instead of getting sad about it or upset about it, I asked myself, what would John do? And that kind of became a mantra for me that year. I knew that John was a person that would have utilized his good community connections to push the culture forward and to bring the culture to places where it maybe wasn't the center. So I did, you know, I reached out to John Richards and I said, how can I get on the variety mix hours on KEXP? Because of the things that I saw them do through that year, especially, I felt like there was a place for it, you know? And we met up, John, Morgan, and myself, and they kind of broke down what it meant to be a variety mix host on KEXP. And it sounded like musical freedom to me, to not be contained just to one genre, but to represent all genres of music, which is what I want to do. And to only play, they told me in that meeting, like, yo, if we hire you, we're hiring you for your ear. We don't want you to ever play a song you don't like. You know, if you, in fact, even if it's in our heavy rotation and it's a song you don't like and you play it on the air and you don't like it, take it off the air while it's playing, you know, which I thought was amazing. That let me know that it was gonna, like, this thing with KEXP was gonna work. So yeah, been there ever since. That was a little over 3 years now that I've been DJing. I started as an overnight host and I've got a daily show there now, 5 days a week. And they also promoted me this summer to associate music director. So I helped Don Yates with just curation of the music library, which is, yes, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to do that work. Our friend Larry Mizell Jr., who was a Street Sounds host I mentioned earlier, he's also promoted. He's a director of editorial, so he's on the executive team at KEXP now, and he's also the new afternoon show host. Ton of great hires at KEXP have happened this year. Vitamin D and DJ Yachty are the 2 new Street Sounds hosts. Supreme LaRock now hosts the Sunday Soul Show. God, Reverend Dollars is on overnight. Mike Ramos is still on overnight. And there's just so many amazing cats at that station. So it's an honor to be there. And but yeah, this feels special. I'm sad I wasn't able to be in the room with Kaz and WD-40 and Nikita to honor 15 years of Zulu Radio, but I wanted to give y'all something about, you know, what it meant for me, because Zulu Radio absolutely is my foundation, you know, in radio. And it's where I cut my teeth, on the mic, on the air, you know. And yeah, I don't think I'd be where I am now if it wasn't for that foundation. So yeah, love y'all. Thank you, Kaz. Thank you, Waylon. Miss y'all very much. And hopefully when this pandemic is over, my God, we can all kick it and do this in person. But yeah, it's a little bit of my story. All right, peace, y'all.